Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire and Evan Ginsberg. I didn't come up with a cute little name for you, but tonight we have a very interesting guest, which is a young man by the name of Justin Woolwine or Woolwine. What's the?
It's Woolwine.
Woolwine. Thank you. And he's been a friend of mine on Facebook for a little while, and he runs his own wrestling federation. It's a little bit different than other wrestling federations, but we're always interested in people who are interested in wrestling but have a different take on it. So welcome to the show, and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. Where are you coming out from? Where are you broadcasting from here?
I am about 50 miles west of Chicago in Loves Park, Illinois.
Nice. Okay. So coast to coast to, you have a coast to on that giant lake of yours.
Yes,
you
sir.
know. And I do love Chicago. It's actually one of my favorite other cities. If it's not San Francisco or New York, I'd say Chicago is right there with some of the great towns. So tell us about your wrestling federation for the fans who are out there.
So Wrestling Federation, some might say is a stretch, but it's actually an action figure wrestling federation. I take wrestling action figures and I create, some call it like stop motion. It's a little bit of a different kind of stop motion. I don't take as many pictures as the traditional stop motion like picture. But I take pictures of my wrestling action figures fighting with no hands or strings or anything like that. And I put them in storylines and in matches. Really, because I started at a time when wrestling wasn't at its peak. So it was my way of taking what I thought these wrestlers should be doing and making it better than what was on TV. And
you were the booker.
Yes.
You basically.
I like I see like online a lot of people give Tony Khan a lot of slack, saying he's kind of like a kid with his toys. That's me. I'm the Tony Khan kid with my toys, making wrestling as I see it should be.
I thought it was very creative. I watched some of your stuff and I was like, it's clever. I mean, it's entertaining to the point of, like you are interested in finding out about like what your thought process is for an alternative storyline. And you figure if this was done in real life, they probably would get over a little bit better than some of the storylines that you've seen in the regular. Where do you come up with some of your ideas for that?
It's hard to. I've watched wrestling for so long, and it's one of those things. A lot of it comes from like missed opportunities that I've seen in real life. Like, not this next show I'm doing, but the following one I'm gonna do Kenny Omega versus Punk. Kind of like a number one contender match, but something like that we thought we could get, but we didn't get. Or like I just did a Roman Reigns versus Kenny Omega match, which some people would say is a dream match. I take inspiration from what I see in real life and I try to mold it in my own way. And it's something there's a bunch of other people online that do it, especially on YouTube. There's thousands of people that make them. So I get a lot of inspiration from people like that, but I've always just, as long as I've had wrestling figures, I've made up my own storylines. I can remember like when I was a kid, me and my dad would set up our Hell in a Cell cage matches and stack them with steel cages and have 60 guys just fighting. And so I've always done it. It's just a matter of taking it to a wider audience on YouTube and recording it and producing it.
Evan, you have any questions?
Do you only do current wrestlers or do you do old school as well?
I do a mix of everything. Like right now, I'd say my favorite storyline, I'm doing Bryan Danielson versus Bret Hart. So like I would try to mix it up. I've had DX on there. Right now, I just made the Briscoes return. AEW just made. Actually, I'm right here. They just
the action figures will never die.
The Briscoes. So I just brought them back. Anybody right now, Roddy Piper is my GM. who better to GM than Piper. And like Big Bubba Rogers is his enforcer. So like there's anybody can be in the Fed.
I just found this. I was going through some old stuff with my kids and found my Jesse the Body Ventura.
Didn't he just sign with WWE? Like
I'm
a legend?
Oh yeah, well, I don't know if the WWE is doing anything with Jesse Ventura these days because they don't get along too well. But this was back in the original '80s version action figure.
I'd like to see a match between Andre the Giant and Sky Lolo. That's one of my fantasy matches.
Yeah, like 2 seconds. I think if you could find an action figure of Sky Low, then you probably should hold on to it and make sure it stays in its box. It's probably one of a kind.
I make them. So like.
Oh really?
I can make. Yes, I have custom action figures all over the place. If I could find one off screen real quick. 1 second. Like right here, I just made. It looks like Bobby Fish, but it's a Nigel McGuinness. Just made a Nigel McGuinness. I got tons of them. Like my Bryan Danielson, I've made. I'm a big fan of DC Comics, so like I love Bane. I actually just made a Bane wrestling action figure to bring him in.
We're gonna have to stop the interview. I'm a Marvel guy, so sorry. Sorry.
I got a Deadpool.
I'm really like old school Marvel.
Old school Marvel.
Yes.
I'm a fan of everything. I'm a nerd.
Really? What a shocker. What a shocker that we have a nerd on this program. Please, someone alert the media. That'd be a first one in 234 interviews that we had a nerd on the show, I think. I've been on every show.
I'd like to see Abdullah the Butcher against Stephanie McMahon. That would be
I think
Abdullah,
a lot of us would.
Stephanie, I'd have to find an Abdullah.
Yes, I think you'd have to glue a couple of wrestlers together to make an Abdullah the Butcher.
He's a bigger fella.
Yeah. So do you still watch wrestling with your dad?
Not as much. It's hard. He's got. I live with my fiance. He has my younger siblings, so it's hard to get together and watch them as much as we'd like to. But no, we definitely still watch and we talk about it all day. We have recently went to SmackDown in Chicago together, and then Dynamite in Chicago together. Like in June, I think we went to 2. So like we go all the time.
It's just, it's funny that SmackDown just occurred in Sacramento on Friday. How much were tickets for SmackDown in Chicago?
SmackDown in Chicago, I think we paid for 2 tickets. It was like $230 for 2 tickets.
Well, yeah, they were, around in the 100 range around here. Evan,
Can I tell you my SmackDown story?
Yep.
A couple of years ago, a buddy of mine gave me some comps to SmackDown at the Garden, and I sat there, and it was so depressing to me as an old school fan because all I could think of was Bruno and Superstar, Morocco and Piper, and I'm sitting there, and the Good Brothers come out with Elias, and they sing, and then they never wrestle. The Good Brothers didn't wrestle; they just sang, and I go, I want to kill myself. Okay, that was my reaction to SmackDown at Madison Square Garden. So I think we just lost Justin.
Justin, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but your camera went out.
I know it froze. I don't know why.
He might be booking a lights out match.
Or
not sure.
Nice under the witness protection program.
Right.
Try.
So
there we go.
I'm sitting there, and every time they play a theme song, the sea of kiddies, little kids with their dads, it's like Pavlovian dog response, and I just go, I got to get out of here. And about the middle of the show, I just walked out. I didn't pay a dime, and I just not for me anymore. I'm sorry.
But you're part of the next generation of wrestling fans, so it's kind of sometimes we get accused of being like the old guys on the show and like not. Is that something that appeals to you, that like the promos now that last longer?
I'm going to Grand Slam on Wednesday. I enjoy AEW. I just think WWE insults your intelligence about 80% of what Triple H pumps out. I mean, you got grown men fighting over a friendship bracelet, and geniuses are crossing oceans, spending 5 figures to see it. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I could say I wish there would be a happy medium between the two. Like, I get needing a storyline and I get needing to wrestle. I find with Dynamite, you got too many storylines where there's not enough story and just too much wrestle. And then you have, on the other hand, you have 4 segments of Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio kissing on Raw. So, like, trying to find a happy medium is what I try to do.
Well, the happy medium is caring about any entertainment. If you're watching a horror movie, it could be a masterpiece, or you could just not care about the 87 people that died. It's the same thing with wrestling. If like Nigel McGuinness is supposed to wrestle Bryan Danielson, and that to me was like Flair and Steamboat and Dory Funk and Jack Briscoe, so I care about it. Exactly. But whether Liv Morgan and Dominic kiss on SmackDown or walk out with each other on a pay-per-view, I don't give 2 shits, honestly. And I'm basically numb by the middle of most WWE pay-per-views until Gunther or Cody come out and have a great match. And so I'm more interested in the match than the storyline, to be honest. But I'll tell you which WWE storylines I did care about. I cared about Daniel Bryan's underdog climb to the top. That to me was, involving, and you cared. I cared about the bloodline until the past few months when, they should have wrapped it up already. It's overkill. And, every once in a while you'll watch something and you're emotionally invested. They say there's no storylines in AEW, but when Cody and Dustin were wrestling each other, that was great. Swerve and Hangman Page, there's a storyline. Tony Storm and Mariah May, there's a storyline. But, don't insult me with a friendship bracelet. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so what I am interested to know, like, what wrestling figure do you feel like is your most treasured? Maybe is it your Nigel McGuinness one that you custom made?
That's hard. I have hundreds. Right now I haven't got it yet. It's something that I'm waiting on. CM Punk they released, they called Ultimate Edition. It has like a bunch of extra articulation and parts and stuff, but they're making one from his Money in the Bank 2011, when he won the title in Chicago from Cena. It's a figure I've wanted since it happened. They made one years ago before he left. I didn't get to get it as a kid, so this is like, I've told everybody it's my holy grail figure is to get this CM Punk from that match, that moment.
Why couldn't you make a living doing this? It seems like a real skill that most people wouldn't have. I would think there'd be lots of fans that would love action figures, indie wrestlers, action figures of themselves, indie wrestlers and such.
There are people that make money off of it. A lot of the people that do, though, typically copy everything WWE or AEW does, which I fight against because it takes the creative element out of it if I'm just copying what's going on TV.
Like, why couldn't you do a Buddy Sotelo action figure?
Ladies and gentlemen.
I'm serious. I think a lot of indie wrestlers.
I have a Buddy Sotelo bobblehead.
There you go. There you go.
I could put anything together as far as figure wise. It's something I haven't really been doing very long either. I've done it probably like 2.5 years, but I took an 8-9 month break. Personal stuff happened. But in the last couple months, I went from 300 subscribers to now I'm over 1,000. And like I just started a podcast. Actually, this coming Thursday, I got my first interview with Madman Pondo. And then like this week, I got like 8 other interviews booked up.
And then when you run out of everybody to interview, that's when you have buddies to tell them on. At the very end of that list of all the other interviews, then when emergency happens, call buddy.
I'm surprised how easy it is to actually get people to do them. I mean, a lot of the people I've contacted are lower indie or legends to the independent scene or deathmatch guys. But I mean, a lot of these guys I don't feel like have ever had their stories told or been able to explain.
You know who's a great interview with the deathmatch guys? Lowlife Louis Ramos. I love that guy. You know him?
I haven't heard of him, but I could look him up and
out of New York. This guy is so charismatic, such a great talker. Lowlife Louis Ramos.
I don't think we've had him on this show, have we?
I think we booked him and something happened that week, but the guy's great. Great
Call
talk.
him up. We'll have him on the show again.
He's very colorful.
I just had Madman Pondo, which that one's interesting. He has a little insight into Matt Cardona, which I'm excited for people to see. This week, I'm going to do an interview with Mickey Knuckles. She just won the Tournament of Death a couple days ago, and I've actually got everybody but one person in that tournament to do an interview. So I'm excited for that series of just having the full tournament do an interview. I think is unique. I've never seen somebody do that. So to have a full tournament and be able to talk to everybody and get their perspective, how it went down and what happened, and I'm excited for it. And as a kid, like I found like going to these shows, the smaller indie shows were much more enjoyable than going to a WWE or AEW or a TNA, because you got to see these guys and talk to them and interact with them. So I'm excited to be able to now get on a podcast and get their story out.
You never know who you're going to meet or see on an indie show, how far they're going to go or not go. I was at an indie show at the Elks Lodge in Queens, and Bray Wyatt, before he was Bray Wyatt, he was just an indie guy. And they actually announced that was his last indie show. He had just signed with WWE, and everybody was congratulating him. And I walked up to him and I said, "Best of luck. You know, I've enjoyed, your family and everything over the years." And guy was very gracious. And next thing you know, he's headlining Madison Square Garden. So you never know with, you can interview. I used to have Willow Nightingale on my old show all the time, and she's a big star now on AEW. So you never know how far people could take it. I knew Mick Foley when he was sleeping in cars back in the day.
Well, I actually got an interview. There was a interview. Well, not an interview, but there was a match that recently went viral on X of this young British guy, Leon Cage. He did the dive and hit the double foot stomp on the guy's back and then caught him in the power bomb. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but
no.
The Young Bucks reenacted it on Dynamite this last week. So the kid's going viral. And this week I messaged him. He's only 17. He wrestles in like smaller British promotions, but he actually said he'd do an interview, which is quite exciting, especially after the viral video and then seeing the Young Bucks and Will Ospreay, comment and try to do it on Dynamite on national television. So like, you're right. You never know who you're going to talk to.
It's a crazy business. 5 years from now, we could be one of the biggest stars in the world. 5 years from now, we could be one bad spot away from a permanent injury and being done.
Or we're doing a memorial show for them.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Unfortunately, about half
You're
of
gonna
our
depress
shows,
Justin.
Yeah, about half of our shows are memorial shows.
That's true.
Sad to say.
The tribute, I've been doing tributes for a lot of the guys that have passed since I've restarted my YouTube channel, and doing 2 or 3s a month is hard because it's sad to see like Sid Vicious hit me hard. I know a couple years ago when Scott Hall passed, I was actually at work when I found that out, and I was crying. And everybody was like, "Why?"
Some of these guys slept on my couch. You can't imagine. Johnny Valiant, Lanny Poffo.
Randy Savage passed away on my birthday when I was 11. Favorite of all time. I loved Macho Man, and I actually got a Macho Man figure. I didn't even want to open it. I was so upset. It was terrible.
Lanny was a good friend of the show. We had him on twice, and he was a really good friend of Evan and Mike Lano, and it just certainly when we lose these people, it means something. Evan had a lot of people. I don't know if you've seen 350 Days yet, Justin.
No, what is it?
Evan, you want to go ahead and?
It's a full-length documentary. Bret Hart, superstar Billy Graham, Ox Baker, 36 legends, basically just pouring their hearts out. And you can watch it on Amazon, or it's on tons of platforms. And
Tubi, I think, also.
Tubi.
What's it called again? I'm sorry.
350 Days.
350 Days, because a lot of the NWA champs literally worked 350 days a year and never saw their family, never saw their kids grow up, and that's basically the idea behind it. And you got
to get close to Ox Baker and superstar Billy Graham, and some of the other guys that were in the movie.
About half of them are gone now. The movie came out about 6 years ago, and half of them are gone. So it's a rough business. I mean, I've spent weekends with these guys, booking them as agents, and I've roomed with some of them. I spent a weekend at the Sheik's house, Iron Sheik. I used to room with Nikolai on the road, and Nikolai called me a few days before he died. So it's when you lose these people, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, Lanny was a health nut. So was Nikolai. These guys took care of themselves. But I tell people, one, Lanny, the last year of his life, was 286 pounds. That's a lot of weight for your heart to carry. Two, he lost his mother, father, and brother in a 10-year stretch. That's a lot of stress and grief and, et cetera, so on. There's a reason that otherwise healthy people, don't make it. And people forget that a lot of the old school wrestlers wrestled in smoke-filled arenas. Smoke-filled arenas, hundreds of nights a year. That can't be good for your lungs, your heart, etc.
Not to mention driving in a car with probably guys who are smoking out cigarettes and in trucks and all that stuff that all the travel that the wrestlers had to do. Extremely hard on you.
Different time zones, and everybody. You got all these guys. Vince, the fans. He pushed these guys beyond human endurance. When we did 350 days, Bret Hart said he worked 330 days as champ. Valentine told me he worked 320 days as a top contender. Think of what this does to you. You're in California on Monday and you're in New York on Tuesday or whatnot, and this is not a healthy, lifestyle. And besides the bumps and the injuries and whatever you have to do to sustain yourself to get through 300 plus days a year. So,
but your wrestling figures, they can wrestle 365 days a year and never get tired and never get hurt. So that is one positive side of it.
Justin, did you ever watch Ray Harryhausen?
No, you've named a lot of guys. I feel like
Ray Harryhausen is not a wrestler.
No, Ray Harryhausen was the original stop action. I shouldn't say the original, one of the early stop action guys.
He did King Kong. He did the original King Kong and all the Sinbad movies.
Yeah, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad with the Cyclops and all those great monsters, and he just do it like frame by frame by frame.
What you really need to see is It Came From Beneath the Sea. Why? Because it's got the octopus that eats the Golden Gate Bridge. It's the one time, and it's the one time you'll get to see Marin County featured in a major monster movie because we're the other half of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's where I happen to be, is on the other side.
Ray Harryhausen was great. Guy was great.
Yeah, he made stuff. I mean, before computers, he made stuff look like exactly like it was alive. A lot of people just couldn't believe the meticulous level of stop motion. But have you ever wanted to be a booker for an indie fed?
That's pretty much a dream. I wanted to wrestle growing up. I've got torn rotator cuff, torn labrum.
How old are you?
24.
Oh boy, this is gonna be great when you're in your 50s. You're gonna love how you feel.
I'm not a size person. I'm only like 115 pounds. I can't gain weight. So like, I'd love to be a wrestler, but it's not likely. On the other hand of that, I love writing storylines. I love, trying to figure out a story for why these guys fight. I like putting matches together. Like, you got to think filming this match, I got to think of why they do every move, how they're going to transition to the next one, make it make sense. Like, I just enjoy all of that. And like, I've got notebooks of just tons of stuff I've written down, ideas. So yes, like, realistically, I've told my dad, like, I would scrub the ring mat if I could be in a wrestling, helping with anything. So like, yeah, booker, timekeeper, ring announcer, commentator, manager, anything. I just love to be a part of this business because it's been the only consistency probably in my entire life. Is like, no matter what's going on in the world, there is pro wrestling, and I can go and get away from COVID or family or anything. Like, you'd
be surprised how that stuff creeps back into wrestling.
Yes.
Even though you thought you were escaping it. That's one of the big issues of once you're in a fed, you understand that stuff creeps in more often than not and becomes a bigger deal than you'd expect, especially if you watch Dark Side of the Ring. You have maybe an even better idea.
Very captivating. That's something I enjoy, and I've heard a lot. It's deterred a lot of people, but like, if anything,
most of it's true. I mean, I've
fascinating to me.
Yeah, and the stuff that I've seen, that knowing some of these people personally, it's true. I mean, they haven't made up a lot of things or over sensationalized stuff. It's just this crazy business. And by the way, if you like your eyes not being gouged out, probably you shouldn't get involved in professional. If you don't like to hear stories about people's eyes getting gouged out, wrestling isn't the business for you, because apparently in every Dark Side of the Ring episode, somebody's eye gets gouged out.
No, it's that stuff. Like, I've backyard wrestled as a kid with my brothers. I know it's not the same, but I think it's fun, and it's something I've always dreamed about. And just like, I've backyard wrestled in front of 10 people, and even the 10 people cheering and hooping and hollering is.
See, Justin, you, to me, embody why wrestling's great. It's because you love wrestling for the sake of wrestling. It's not wrestling because it'll make you famous. It's not wrestling because it'll make you money. It's not wrestling because, chicks dig you. It's wrestling because wrestling itself is an incredible form of art, of physical artwork. And that's why we're here. That's why Evan and I are here overall. I mean, I
have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling. So
you have a love-hate relationship with everything, Evan.
So when I sit there at AEW Wednesday, I'm going to love Will Ospreay. I'm going to hate something else, and that's just the way it works after being involved with it for 50 years. 50 years I've been attending since 1974.
I was at WrestleMania 2. So that ought to tell you, that I'm hardly, new school to anything. I actually got tickets to see Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy in the blue cage.
I never got to see Hogan, which is some, growing up, like, my dad would always have videos or pictures of me with the bandana on and the glasses on, and I'm doing the over the ear in nothing but underwear.
Hulk Hogan's best match is still worse than Ospreay's worst match. It's still
Hogan was actually decent in Japan. Vince had him dumb it down. But
I've always what I've liked about wrestling is the people that can do the least amount of anything and make it mean the most. So like Hogan or like even Randy Savage, like he did the elbow drop and he did the axe handle on the outside. But if you look at it, Savage didn't do a ton in the ring, but everything he did meant so much. So like even nowadays, like I'll watch guys like LA Knight, for instance. LA Knight doesn't do a ton in the ring, but it's enjoyable. Or Orton, like Randy Orton doesn't do 1,000 moves, but everything he does matters. And Gunther and Reigns, I love Roman Reigns, and I've got people that have argued with me about that, but like Reigns, he can work, 5 dates a year and make millions of dollars, and everything he does matters.
That does bother me a little bit, working that few number of shows. I do think you have an obligation as a champion to get out there at least once a month. Yeah, I really do.
My problem with Reigns is, and I'm a fan basically of his. He wrestled, I believe it was 14 times last year or whatnot, and some of the matches just weren't that good. If you're only going to wrestle,
especially at the end of his run, they wasn't.
Yeah, if you're only going to wrestle 14 times, you go out and kick ass every time you're out there. And him and LA Knight, that was lackluster. And
Evan comes from the old school of Bruno Sammartino. So talk about
wrestle 250 nights a year.
Well, I can tell you right now, my absolute favorite is MJF.
And MJF is great.
I love it because he embodies like the new school of wrestling, but he reminds me so much of like Flair when Flair was the biggest.
He's even more like Piper.
Or Piper. Like but he mixes so many of them together and it's just so good. And everything MJF does is amazing. Like he's my champion MJF right now.
Tremendous.
Do you think he's going to eventually sell out to the WWE?
I don't know if they'll let him be the MJF that he is in AEW.
Nobody is what they are in AEW because AEW lets anyone do whatever they feel like.
I don't think Triple H would let him go on national TV and call him an effing mark. It just wouldn't happen.
Do you like what Triple H is doing for the WWE right now?
Some things. It's very.
What do you like? What sort of stuff do you think is positive?
Positive. I like the Gunther stuff. Him world champion, his rise world champion is great. I do enjoy the CM Punk Drew McIntyre stuff. I'm a huge CM Punk fan, but the bracelet I think they've taken too much with that. The same with like the Bloodline. I've enjoyed their storyline. I think arguing over a necklace though at this point is kind of dumb.
How long do you think it's going to be before CM Punk gets fired, by the way? What do you think the over-under?
I actually, from what I've seen and read and heard, he might be there for the rest of his life.
I'll take the under.
You'll take the under?
I'll take the under on that.
I'm a big fan of Punk. I have been since he started in WWE the first time. So,
But Justin, let me just tell you this. Don't try the same career trajectory as CM Punk. If you want to be successful in life, don't try getting fired at everywhere you worked.
Don't
and then
piss
hope the next place, the place that you used to work at, will hire you for more money after you've been fired at the last place you worked at. That generally doesn't happen to the rest of us. Get fired, and then we beg for another job somewhere else at half the price that we used to work at for another one. So he's not exactly the perfect role model.
I'd say my hope would be to just be as pure of a person as I can and just try to see if my love for wrestling could get me in there. If it doesn't, I enjoy talking to people and making my own stuff. But if I can get in the door somewhere, that's my goal. Is to.
Do you love CM Punk because he's from Chicago, or
I'm actually from West Virginia, so
you do have that Southern thing about you.
I'll take that as a compliment, but no. So it's, I don't know. Maybe as a kid, it was the straight edge thing. It was different. It was kind of the rebel to everything else. As a kid, there was a lot of those kind of problems, those drug related problems near me in my childhood. So punk was the opposite of that. So it was kind of like
where in West Virginia were you?
I was in between Charleston and Huntington, so like the southern part of West Virginia, right on the Kentucky border.
Been there.
And where I grew up. I watched a lot of IWA East Coast there, which is where I met my Madman Pondo there, and like Billy Gunn would come through there all the time, and I met Balls Mahoney, and Chris Hero wrestled there all the time. I've had a lot of conversation with him as a kid. Tried to get a hold of him now. He won't respond. But like I met a lot of those guys that are now stars or have been stars that have moved on to producer roles and stuff like that through like.
I got a funny Balls Mahoney story for you.
Okay.
It was an indie in Jersey, and it was like at a like a small local whatever, and they just didn't want the place damaged, and they said, please keep it clean, watch what you say on the mic, no juice, just family. Basically, they said, let's do a PG show. So Balls Mahoney comes out, and he's immediately, covered in blood, and and he has his kid with him. He was a kid at the time. And basically the guy's covered in blood. He gets his paycheck and he just gets into the car covered in blood and drives off. And this is like my last memory of Balls Mahoney. True story. Yeah.
I actually, the India I went to, we met him outside. I got his autograph and stuff.
Nice guy, but out of his mind, but nice guy, yeah.
For like 30 minutes before the show. Just out there, my dad was smoking cigarettes with him, and there's just talking with this guy from ECW. And it was just, it was funny because he signed my little toy wrestling belt then. And then at the end of the night, he actually signed it again. I don't even think he remembered it. But no, Balls Mahoney, a great guy.
Balls Mahoney did a shoot interview where he said, I wake up every morning and I crawl across the room to get my painkillers. And the second I heard that, I go, this poor guy's not going to make it. And he didn't. He died young.
Let me just say this, Justin. No other business that you'll ever be involved in will you meet such a collection of straight shooting people that like just tell it exactly the way it is all the time, and B, totally insane people that are just there's no reason at all they should be in this business doing what they're doing to themselves constantly, yet they do. I mean, you'll never understand it. I don't understand. I've been doing it now for over 25 years. I've been involved with wrestling, and I still don't understand why everyone does exactly what they do. In fact, it's why I do this show, is to try to figure out, still to get down to why people do what they do and what motivates them. There's never really a universal thing, but there is something within all of us that's kind of crazy, yet we all internally legitimize it in a way that is totally sane to ourselves.
Well, let me take a crack at it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think, honestly, any promotion, whether it's big or small, whether it's a $1 billion company or an indie with 10 people, like we were saying before, I think it's a surrogate family. I think for as long as you're involved in that indie, and I've worked in a variety of capacities, play-by-play, a little heel managing, not nowhere near as much as Russell, Buddy Sotelo. But, I've done publicity for indies, et cetera, so on. And you just like consume with it. That's like you just, these are my closest friends. These are my buddies. These you're on the road. You're out at the pancake place 2 in the morning or whatnot, and but what happens is it's like summer camp wrapping up, or even a movie wrapping up, You worked on it together for the longest time, and people go their separate ways, and some don't end well, and some friendships do implode, et cetera, so on. So, like I said, it's a surrogate family for whatever reason. I mean, sometimes the promoter's a good guy or a good woman on occasion, and it's like a mom or a dad figure, and it is what it is. But some of it isn't quite real because years later, they're not in your life anymore. They're gone. It's like over for the most part.
And let me give you a little bit of advice from my end, which is that when you book, it's a lot. I mean, no offense to what you're doing. Action figures don't talk back. No. So action figures don't care where they are on the card. Action figures won't say, I need to do my finisher at X time of the match, and it's got to go over, or else I'm not doing the show.
I need to wrestle first because I'm double booked tonight.
Right. Or that they just don't show up at all. Action figures always show up, as long as you don't lose them under the couch or something.
The guys who triple book themselves because they figure the promoters are going to cancel 2 of the 3 shows, then they don't, and they end up missing one of the shows.
Or they'll play one Fed against the other, and they'll say, okay, you picked me for $50, but this other Fed wants me for 75. So now you got to pay me 100, and so on and so forth. But, so there's so many factors that go into booking, and that the ego level of it is so big.
I've read into that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing that the human dynamic behind booking can, make you some good friends and can make you some enemies in the business, because if guys feel that they're not getting their just due by being booked the way they think they should be booked, I mean, the best thing is when you have wrestlers in a Fed that are like, hey, you book me whatever. I don't care if you book me in a cage match full of rabid gorillas. I'm going in there for you. And then there's guys that are like, hey, if I don't get a title shot by the 3rd time I appear on your show, and I don't win the title by the 5th match, I'm not wrestling for you guys. You'd be surprised how many guys there are in the business that are like that. That'll say, if I go to Feds and I collect titles, and if I don't get a title from you guys right away, I don't want to work for you. Or worse still, they'll say that in their own minds. They won't tell you that. And by the 3rd time you book them and they're not at the top of the card, they just won't show. It's amazing. It's the card subject to change are the most magical words in professional wrestling, because I've never been at a card that wasn't subject to change in my life. There's always something that changes, always. And being able to book on the fly and to, maybe even change your title match, your main event, because somebody didn't show and you put someone else in there and hope that it all gets over. That's where you're eating the Rolaids you're shotgunning them. You're taking the canister and just throwing them all in your mouth, and just I had to book one show in my entire life because all the other guys in the Fed abandoned it, and we had a show planned, and I showed up there and nobody else showed up there, and it was suddenly like having well, this is a dated reference, but it's like having Dr. McCoy run the Enterprise. I'm no Captain Kirk and I'm no Spock. So like having the chief medical officer run the Starship Enterprise is not something you want to do. And it was tough trying to like direct the circus full of monkeys and get them all, in ready to do a show and to get, to line up and to set the match card. It's harder to do in person than it is to do in real life. So, hopefully there'll be a Fed that can, introduce you that way and let you start working yourself in, because it's a tough place to go to. And pretty much everyone that starts their own Fed wants to be a booker. Few people bring in bookers, because they pretty much do it when they start their own Fed. That's what everybody's dream is, to do that booking. Evan, your thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of it is cronyism and nepotism, and the booker wants to put himself through the table, and the booker's girlfriend has to be out there, and the booker's girlfriend's 63 years old, but somehow she's involved in the action, and it's a little absurd, a lot of it. And what I tell people is some of the biggest stars in the business that I've met and worked with was so humble and nice, and then you get some indie asshole who's done nothing, and they think they're so much bigger than they actually are, and the ego can be, just you just can't work with the person. But like I said before, you still never know how far somebody's going to go or not go, and basically you try to get along with everybody. I mean, that's any job you're at, because you don't want to burn bridges.
You can tell how far people are going to go, because the ones that go far are the ones that don't quit, no matter how much adversity gets put in their way. And
a guy like Eddie Kingston was knocking around for 20 years, and he finally became a big star.
Perfect example.
Yeah,
Perfect example.
Yeah, that guy worked indies forever. I saw that guy a zillion times, and you always knew he had heart, but the next thing you know, he's a big star and he's making money. So he stuck it out.
Or even when you're a guy like Nigel McGuinness, okay? Sometimes you're never going to be the big WWE star, And sometimes you say to yourself, this is as big a star as I'm going to be. And you know what? That's still good enough for me, because I did the things I wanted to do in the ring. I did what I wanted to do for a Fed. I got to manage a gigantic mask guy and have us run roughshod over a federation. I loved that. That was something I actually got to create a character that I made in a wrestling game when I was a teenager, about younger than you. I got to make him into an actual pro wrestler and manage him in the ring. That to me was so goddamn cool.
You have to tell your audience who you're referring to, because they're not psychic.
Well, I did it twice. One with Mark Bison Smith as Super Destroyer 2000. Then later, when I went to California Championship Wrestling, I took a guy named Paul Isadora, 7 feet tall, and made him Mr. Massacre. And both of them were just big silent mask guys that I did all the talking for and let them do my bidding. It was great. It was fantastic. And it was the embodiment of something that I loved as a kid, seeing it out there in the ring in front of an audience and getting over is the thing that meant everything to me. I didn't care that the WWE never called me and said, buddy, we want you to be a manager. That didn't mean anything to me. My goals were set in something that I could achieve. And if you do something that you say to yourself, I have a reasonable chance of succeeding in this. If I set my target goal at something, you can do it. You just have to eat a lot of fucking shit to get there. I mean, you have to, show up at a, drive 3 hours into the middle of the countryside, and then, the number of wrestlers in the show outnumbers the audience that's actually there watching the show. And you just don't go, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here, I quit. Because the floor is just littered with people that quit. There's so many reasons to quit doing wrestling, way more than there are reasons to keep doing it. And so if I have a piece of advice to throw at you, is that, you got to stay at it, and you got to keep looking for the opportunities, because they're not going to find you. You got to find them yourself. And then once you find an opportunity, you can't quit. If somebody, gives you that. Evan, tell Justin about all the people that flaked out on interviews for you, that you've given them golden opportunities.
I conducted a half dozen or so casting calls when we made The Wrestler, and there were indie guys who no-showed because they had $25 indie bookings. I couldn't make this up. Aronofsky, who's one of the great directors alive today, he's like, where is this guy? And I go, he's wrestling. Like, and then after a while, Aronofsky was around it so long, like he started to understand, the mentality that the wrestling came before being immortalized in a quality film, the absurdity of it. I saw a lot of this, and the obsessiveness can pay off. A guy devotes his life to it, or it could be literally the death of them because they abuse themselves too long and too hard, and there's a long trail of dead wrestlers before their time. Unfortunately,
it's a tough business.
Yeah.
We're just telling you, at least from promoter side, maybe not as tough, but we've seen promoters get chewed up, especially people that help book and are financially behind a lot of it.
So I get light bulbs, and I just got $1 million idea for Justin. And you can thank me for this when you're rich and famous in a few years. So this just popped in my head. You have 3 hours of wrestling content on some of these shows. Raw, they say SmackDown's going to 3 hours. AEW is only 2 hours, but they have 5 hours of weekly TV. 5 hours. Okay. Why don't you do a stop action with some active characters, send it to guys like Tony Khan and Triple H, and just do something great? Because why couldn't they, in a 3-hour show, do a 30-second or 1 minute or 2 minute, whatever, stop action segment? And it would be something unique and different, and it could put over their guys, and it could be dramatic, it could be funny, it could be campy, it could be whatever you choose it to be. And it's like anything else. 19 guys may reject it, but the one right guy says, wow, this is something different. This is interesting. I could, Saturday Night Live, one of the biggest shows in history, they got stop action on it.
And right? The Mr. Bill show.
I could definitely try that. I mean, it doesn't hurt to send it out and give it a go and see what they say.
And if they don't use it, you use it. It's not like you're wasting your time and effort, monetize, your social media and use it anyway. But my point is, a lot of people that were wildly successful, they had hundreds of rejections before the one thing made them rich and famous. So I would set my sights high, because you have a talent that a lot of people don't have. I wouldn't know how to do stop action. I mean, the average person has no idea.
Agreed.
So just to do something incredibly creative, and the right person might say, wow, this works, like you do like a Swerve Strickland, stop action, like some crazy segment. And Prince Nana's a creator.
He's got to find the action figures for it, though.
Yeah, but he makes action figures.
Swerve Strickland.
There you go.
Nice.
Brilliant minds think alike. So seriously, Prince Nana is a record industry guy. He's not a 9-to-5er. He thinks outside the book. You send some stuff to like him and Swerve, and like my late mother would say, the worst they could say is no.
You're not wrong.
Seriously.
I can tell you, like, since I've started doing the interviews, I've probably emailed and messaged 500-600 people in the last week. You get 20 fish on the line, and maybe you might only get 3 in the boat, but that's...
Well, the next step is, once you start getting named people, you tell the other named people, this guy, and this guy did my show,
Well,
and then they...
How I've gotten, like I said, I got the most of the Tournament of Death people to do it, but I did the interview with Pondo, and I just let them guys know, hey, Pondo is in this tournament with you guys. Would you guys like to do an interview too? And most of them was like, yeah, I'll do one, sure. Like, let's just figure out a right time.
But go from there and call some of the old ECW guys, and 9 say no and 1 says yes. You're taking it to the next level. Seriously.
And then I was messaging Russell the other day, and he was telling me just go to promotions and try to talk to promoters and try to talk to their guys, because you never know, one of these guys at an indie might know a Booker T or a Shawn Michaels or somebody from.
You'd be amazed how many the 6 degrees of separation thing goes. I mean, you often only need 1 or 2 degrees of separation to get connected to somebody. So yeah, I mean, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, that's how I found you. And we're almost out of the hour today, so I want to make sure everyone gets to where they need to go on time. So I appreciate you being here on the show.
Eddie Mansfield does TV. Get in touch with Eddie Mansfield.
Okay.
There you go. Why don't you give everyone your social media links, how they can get a hold of you?
Okay. It's at ILW Pro Wrestling for everything. So it's just ILW Pro Wrestling for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, and then YouTube. All those, I try to keep it simple for everywhere.
Great, Justin. Evan, you want to throw out some plugs here?
Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. And check out Wrestling Then and Now, starring Killer Kowalski, Don Arnold, Homicide, Nikolai Volkov, many others. Of course, 350 Days. And yours truly, the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. And I will be at AEW's Grand Slam this Wednesday, and I'll give my honest opinion on all of it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being part of the show today. I know it was last second notice, but you did great, and we really appreciate having you on. And we'll have you on in the future, especially if you got new thing. Hopefully a Fed will pick you up and you can tell us about a new Fed you'll be working with. So really great to have you, and I'll be on your show one of these days too. So
can't wait.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see y'all next week. Good night, everyone.